today we're in week 4 of our Triggers series, and we're going to be talking about stress. Come on, somebody. Anybody ever been stressed? Yeah, every person. If you're not raising your hand, just a liar. That's all it is. You shouldn't lie in church. I'm just saying, all right? But you can be stressed anywhere you go, right? You go to work and your boss doesn't seem to appreciate you. You feel overworked and underpaid and you're stressed out. You think, I'll go home and I'll escape this stress, and maybe the kids are going crazy or something's happening and it's just wild and you don't find relief there. And so you think, well, maybe I'll go out with some friends, and there's tension there and you're stressed out over kind of what they want you to be, and you feel like you can't live up to their expectations, if you will. And then you say, well, at least I'll come to church. And even at church, you can experience stress. And what I want you to know is that not all stress is bad, okay? Stress is simply this, a very simple definition. It's pressure or tension. Pressure or tension. So tension's a good thing. You want resistance when you're working out. That's how you build muscle, right? So sometimes stress can actually help us to get stronger in our faith. And pressure can also help us in the sense that it can push some things out of us, kind of like a sponge that gets squeezed, and it gets some of the junk out of us that we don't want to be in us. And so we can see it and evaluate it and let God see it in the light that He really wants us to see. And so it's not always bad, but sometimes stress isn't good. And sometimes stress is something that we even create. And I want to take just an angle on it today because there's so many things that cause stress. But we're going to talk about busyness. And we're going to just get into the nitty-gritty here. But I want to ask you this question. What would you do if you had more time in your day? I magically allot you 2 more hours in your day. What are you doing? Some of you are like, I already know. I'm sleeping. Exactly. Number 1 answer. That's number 1 on Family Feud. Sleeping, okay? All right. I'm sleeping. I absolutely know what I'm doing. I feel always like I'm tired and groggy, and I just don't have the energy I need throughout the day. Or maybe you say, I want to really, honestly, I want to spend more time with my family. I would love to be able to do that. And I feel like sometimes I shortchange them because I just don't have enough hours in the day. Or some of you might say, I'd like to spend more time with God. I'd like to, start reading my Bible more regularly. Or maybe I'd like to just spend some time in prayer and grow closer in my relationship with Jesus. And those are all great things. In fact, maybe you want to work out, take care of your body, a whole bunch of stuff. And I felt all these things before. But the truth is, most of us would like more time to fit more stuff into our lives. It's funny how 20 years ago they said the rise of technology would mean we had more time on our hands, and all it's done is put technology in our hands. And it's just made it more accessible. And so we don't really have as much downtime as we used to have. And we often say this idea of being busy is important, I think, in our lives. In fact, I would say sometimes we even idolize busyness, right? We think that because we're busy, we're wanted. Because we're busy, somebody must need me. It makes us feel valued because we don't have any time to spare. But how many know being busy all the time is also one of the most exhausting things ever? Come on. That's the truth. So for the last few years, I've tried really, really hard when somebody asks me, how are you doing, not to say I'm busy. Now, sometimes I am busy, but I try really hard not to say that I'm busy, because I think when we have that mentality, like I said, sometimes we begin to crave that busyness, and we have to kind of detox from that, if you will. Here's why. Because I believe that God has given us everything we need. So if we constantly say we don't have time for the things that God wants us to have time for, it's a direct result of what we've inserted into our life that we don't need to have. And so we have to begin to separate those two things. In fact, 2 Peter 1:3 says it this way. It says, His divine power, God's divine power, has given us everything. Everyone say everything. Very good. We need everything we need for a godly life. God's given us everything, and that includes time. And here's the crazy thing. You may not have as much money as somebody else. You may not have some of the gifts or talents or abilities as somebody else. But all of us play on a level playing field when it comes to our time. It's the great equalizer in life. And so today I want to share a message with you entitled Your Best Yes. Your Best Yes. And I would encourage you to take notes. I told you last week that we're going to be a note-taking church. Here's why. Because we retain more and we can go back and recall God's goodness and faithfulness to us in those moments when we need to remember those things. So we have time We have time to do what God has called us to do. That's what the Bible is telling us. So if we ever wish we had more time, it's time to evaluate what's in our life. Listen, I have time for what I choose to have time for. I have time, you have time for what you choose to have time for. Now, let's be honest. This is just summarized in a silly example. But how many have ever posted something on Instagram and it's taken you longer than 15 minutes to post it? Come on now. You know, you got to get the right light, like the right angle. Oh, yeah, that's my cheekbone looks so good right there. It's fantastic. And I think this is good lighting. Yes, this is great lighting. And then when you take the picture, you finally get the picture, then you got to choose the right filter because you can't have the right filter. I mean, you're going to ruin the whole picture if you have the wrong filter. I mean, it's just a waste of time, right? And then when you get you got to write the right caption. And you got the right amount of emojis, and like you got to it's got to be perfect, because if it's not, then it's a waste of time. And so we've wasted 15 minutes coming up with the perfect picture for Instagram. And I think so many things, if we really looked at our life, if we were really brutally honest, that we could all say, you know, there's some things that we're just wasting time on that we don't really need to do. And that's what I want to challenge you to think about today. Because the problem is this, is that you can even have good things that are taking up your time and keeping you from the most important things. The good things can keep you from the most important things. We often let the urgent, what's right there in the immediate, push away from what's important, what God has before us. So we must look at ourselves in the mirror and say, I will choose what's most important over what's urgent. And I want us to read from Luke chapter 10 today. And we're going to look at a story of two sisters, and we're going to have a little bit of fun from it, with it. But I want us to read here. And if you don't have a Bible, by the way, we have some for you out at the Welcome Center. Those are yours to take and keep. We want you to have those. I think this is one of the ones that we have out there. But that we want you to be able to read the Bible because we believe that it will change your life. You can also download it on your device. YouVersion's a great tool to be able to use for that. But I want to read from Luke chapter 10. Jesus has done all these great miracles and wonderful things, and then we're going to pick up the story. Verse 38, it says this. Now as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving. Martha was distracted. How many know that distraction can be dangerous? I remember when I was 12 years old, I had two stepbrothers, an older one and a younger one. The younger one we always beat up on, but the older one I never really wanted to threaten because he was stronger than me, all right? And so, but we would always go out and ride our bike. Anyone grew up riding your bike? Like, that's what we did all day long, right? You went, this was days before cell phones, and so your parents didn't know where the heck you were. They just hoped that you'd show up. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's what it was, all right? And this was also in the day when you didn't wear helmets, because, like, helmets were just suggestions. No one really wore a helmet. Like, it's just our brain, you know? And so my older brother would always challenge me to races, and I was literally like 0 for 100. I'd never won, and a lot of times it wasn't even close. He was just better and faster. And so this one time he challenges me. I remember we're in a park, and there's a steep hill. And so he challenges me, and I was like, yes, because I'm kind of optimistic in these things. I'm always up for a good challenge, all right? And even though I was 0 for 100, I thought this will be the day. This will be the time he will weep, and he will eat my dust right now, all right? And so we're going down this really steep hill, and I'm doing something I've never done before. I'm winning. And so I'm in unfamiliar territory. He's not in front of me, so I can't see him. He's not beside me. I can't see out of my peripheral, so I do something that is the cardinal sin of any racer, is I look back to see where he was. And I was like, glory to God, I'm going to win this race. And I turned back around. Somehow, some way, there was a giant oak tree. And I just slammed into that oak tree, fell to the ground, hit my head. I had a concussion. Only time I know that I had a concussion, because my stepdad came up to me, and there were 3 of them. And I looked at the middle one, and I said, I'm okay, don't worry. And so there I was. And that's the danger that we have when we distracted. And Martha was distracted with serving. It seemed good. No one would look at what Martha was doing and say it was bad. But she got distracted on what was right in front of her. On who was right in front of her. There was Jesus. And she was so busy doing stuff for him that she wasn't spending time with him. It continues, verse 40, and it says, she went up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Such a victim right here. Tell her then to help me. How many have siblings? Yeah, you know what I mean. We have 5 kids. So just imagine this magnified. So there will be times when we send our 5 and our 6-year-old daughters up to clean their room. And inevitably what happens is one of them starts cleaning and one of them starts playing. And you know what happens? They come down and they say, Dad. And I take that back. It's not even true. They say, Mom. Moms, you know what I'm talking about. All right. Mom, they're not helping. It's not fair. And there's Martha. Jesus, I'm doing all this work for you. And it's not really fair that my sister's just sitting there doing nothing. How many have ever been there, maybe in the adult life, though? God, I'm doing all these things for you, and they don't seem to care. I'm such a victim, and it doesn't seem fair. I think sometimes if we would just say what we're saying with a whiny voice, we might actually hear what we're really saying. Like it would help. And so here's Martha, distracted, tattling on her sister. People in church sometimes even, you used to pay attention to me, but now I feel like you pay attention to other people. Here's the deal. I love my children. I just don't want to live with them forever. Come on, somebody. Yeah, come on. It's okay. We rejoice. In the church, we can't stay spiritual infants and babies forever. Spiritual children, sometimes we got to grow up and mature and move out. You know, there was a day when I moved out of my house and I started my own family. And some of you are waiting just kind of in this like teenage phase of your spiritual relationship with Jesus. And he's saying, hey, maybe it's time you start looking for your own place. Maybe it's time you start investing in other people. Maybe it's time you start getting up and Jesus is listening to Martha whine here. But then he responds to her, verse 41, but the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things. Martha, you're stressed out and you're worried about all the things that are causing you to be busy. But he says this, but one thing is necessary. What Martha was doing did not seem wrong, but Jesus said one thing was necessary. Don't ask yourself if what you're doing is good. Ask yourself if it's necessary. Because you'll be able to defend almost everything in your life that keeps you busy with it being good. It's why you're doing it. But I'm not asking you, is it good? Jesus is asking us, is it necessary for us to do? Don't trade God for good. Don't do it. And then it ends with this. It says, Mary has chosen, she's chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. Would you pray with me for a moment? Father, we thank you for the opportunity to be here today. God, I pray that you would speak life, that you would encourage your people. God, that they would find hope and healing. God, that we would get out of the breakneck pace that the busyness causes us to be in, and that we would rejoice in the things that you have for us. In Jesus' name, amen. So this story has many angles, but we're going to look through the lens of focus. What Mary was focused on and what Martha was focused on. We're going to first start with Martha, but here's what you need to know. Martha felt the pressure to perform, but Mary understood the power of presence. She felt the pressure to perform, but Mary understood the power of presence, to be in the moment. I have to be honest with you, I'm not very good at often being in the moment. My mind's always racing ahead to the next thing that needs to be done. And today, I just want to challenge you to be in the moment, to let God speak to you, to not think about all the other stuff that you're going to have going on in your day. Be in the moment. Because our takeaway is this. Our takeaway from this entire message is this. You have time for what you choose to have time for. You have time for what you choose to have time for. But the secondary issue is that you need to make time for the right thing. And this is all about the process and order. What Martha was doing wasn't necessarily bad, but she had it out of order. She wasn't doing it with the right heart. She needed to first spend time with Jesus, what Mary was doing, and then out of that, she would have gladly become a servant. In fact, the Bible tells us in Deuteronomy 28, verse 47, the people, they're not worshiping God. They turned away, and it says this, because you did not serve the Lord your God. He didn't say because you didn't serve the Lord. Because you did not serve the Lord your God with joyfulness and gladness of heart. That was their downfall. See, you can serve and be a bitter person. You can give and feel like a victim. You can be around people and be doing it for the wrong reasons. What you do is not as important as who you are. So I ask you the question, what's the one thing? You don't get two, you don't get three, you get one. What's the one thing that you've been putting off that you need to focus on in your life? It might be your relationship with God. I remember there have been times in my life when I felt like I was a full-time pastor and a part-time follower of Jesus. And I don't want to be that. And I don't think any of us want to be that. Maybe it's spending time with your kids. You know that they say they grow up so fast in the blink of an eye and they're gone. It's crazy for me to think that my oldest is 13, our youngest is 5, and it goes so fast. Or maybe you say, I want to come to church consistently because I know that when I build that habit into my life, I'm better for it. But these things are hard to do. So I want to talk about I'm going to get hyper practical today for a few minutes, 3 practical steps to defeat busyness. 3 practical steps to defeat busyness. Number 1, I heard this years ago. It's helped me so much from Craig Rochelle. He said, live with selective excellence. Live with selective excellence. Listen, we know that honor or excellence honors God and that it inspires people. But here's the other truth. Excellence is not perfectionism. Oh, any perfectionists in the house? Come on now. Okay, I'm gonna help you to become a recovering perfectionist, all right? Excellence is not perfectionism. You can't be excellent at everything. It's impossible. It will tire you, wear you out. You will be broken down. So John Acuff, he wrote a book called Finish, and one of the things that he said is that sometimes you have to bomb things. You have to be terrible. Like we're going to go theoretically here, all right? I could get voice lessons, and I could maybe stand up here and sing on the worship team. It's debatable, I know, okay, if you've ever heard me sing. But the question isn't could I, the question is should I? And that question is no. Should I? No. It's a resounding no. For all of you and for my sanity, all right, and for the growth of this church. It's a no. And I'm okay with that because God didn't call me to that. And so I love singing off key, off pitch down there along with people up here who are crushing it. Like, that's a good thing. And you got to be okay with other people being better than you at certain things. Stop comparing yourself to everyone and rest in the calling that God has on you. But here's the other truth. You can't bomb everything, all right? You're like, I'm going to bomb it all right? No, you got to do some things well, all right? So how do we do those some things well? I want to give you a couple real practical tips. Number 1, create an artificial deadline for yourself. If you're a procrastinator out there, this will help you a lot. Some of y'all know who I'm talking to. Just look over at the person next to you. It's probably them. But create an artificial deadline. So I have an artificial deadline for when my message needs to be done, and that's Thursday for me. And so I try to get it done by Thursday, and then so I can get it to James on Friday. It's not always happened, but I try really hard to create that artificial deadline. The reality is, my real deadline is Sunday at 10 a.m. when we show up. That's my real deadline, right? Like, I can even push it and be like 10:25 right after worship, all right? Some of you, you're like, yeah, I've done that, all right? But my artificial deadline causes me and forces me to do some things that I wouldn't normally do. Here's what it does. It forces me to delegate certain things at the beginning of my week that I would otherwise be tempted to do. It forces me to say no to things that I shouldn't be doing, to make quicker and better decisions. This also gives me more time to be refreshed and to work on the things that are the most important. Here's the truth. I spend about probably 12 to 15 hours maybe in a week, and I feel like that gets me to about 90% of my message done. spend another 12 to 15 hours and maybe get it to 95%. For those of you thinking, what would it take to get to 100%? That's a myth and an illusion. It does not really exist, all right? Okay? Would I be better off taking that 12 to 15 hours, getting it to 90%, and then using my other 12 to 15 hours to invest in people, relationships, leadership development? Absolutely. Some of you are wasting time. You are so busy saying it has to be perfect. And you got to let go of that and realize that God's called you to some things, and you got to just say, God, this is not saying, God, hey, this is just passable. God, this is good, but I'm gonna trust that you have other things for me as well. Here's what perfectionism, why it's so dangerous. Not just because it makes you less productive, but because it makes you less present. What was happening with Martha? Had to be perfect. The environment's got to be perfect. And so she wasn't present with Jesus. She missed her moment, this incredible moment. And if you read later, Martha redeems herself and she gets it, but in this moment, she missed it. See, I remember when we first bought our home, our first home. We had a townhouse before that, and it was pretty small, not like super nice or anything, and I never wanted to have people over because it was like, I just felt like people would look at it and judge me and stuff like that. And so we bought our first home. And it wasn't like any nicer. It was a little bigger, but it was not nicer. The kitchen wasn't redone. The bathrooms didn't look great. And Carol and I had a conversation, and we said, we always go everywhere else. If we buy this home, we want people to be able to come in. And we had to choose relationship over perfection. Some of you've been choosing perfection all your life, all the stuff you have to get done, and you've sacrificed all the relationships that you should be having. And I want you to know you cannot do it alone. You cannot do this life alone. It's why we say we need to find community, that we're better together, because we weren't made to live in isolation. That might give you all the control you want, but it will not build the character you need. Remember, choose relationship. Choose relationship, because the way we treat people is far more important than the image we create for them. The way we treat them is more important than the image we create for them. I don't remember one person talking about how ugly my kitchen was. Maybe they did, but I don't remember any of them. But I remember lots of relationships built in that home. That can be you as well. Martha was distracted because she wanted the experience to be perfect, but Mary understood that there was nothing more perfect than experiencing Jesus. So it's all a part of selective excellence. Number 2, this one's kind of fun. You get to create a to-don't list. Come on, how many got a to-do list? Anyone? To-do list? Am I the only to-do? I got a to-do list, like every day. I'm a list guy. So you get to create a to-don't list. What are the things that maybe you've been doing for years, but you don't need to be doing anymore? I think we do stuff all the time. Listen, you might even have like a subscription to something. You just always had it, and you can live without it. Like I remember when we stopped having cable, and I was like, I don't think I'll be able to function. We're not going to have a satellite dish. How do people do this? And then like after 2 weeks, I was like, oh, yeah, it's not that bad. In fact, I think my life is better. I'm happier because I'm not always watching the news. This is great. This sounds great, but it's easier said than done, right? It's kind of like laundry. This is a universal law. You can put laundry in the washer and in the dryer, maybe even to a basket, but folding it is so hard. Okay, confessional right now. How many have laundry that is not folded at home right now? Yeah, freedom. All right. I feel better about myself today. But here's the thing, piles just keep on growing, and sometimes that's what it feels like with life. We're trying to fold stuff and put it away, but there's always another thing, and it's just adding to the pile because we view things the wrong way. See, when we add to the pile without removing something, it gets intimidating. We end up getting anxious and stressed out like Martha was. In fact, as a church in this upcoming series that we're talking about hope and healing, one of the things that we're going to do is not only figure out what we need to do, but it's going to help us to clarify who we're not going to be. Listen, nothing against scrapbooking, but we're not going to have a scrapbooking club at our church. Not because it's not a great thing, and if you want to have one with a few people, fantastic. But it's not what we're going to put our resources and energy toward. I'll go a little bit further. We're not going to be the church where people just walk in and don't feel welcome, don't get said hi to or paid attention to. And some people will say, well, some people just want to slip in and slip out. That's fine. We just probably won't be the church for them. And we're going to be okay with that because we're going to create a welcoming environment because that's who God has called us to be. Come on, church. Some of you are going to go home today, sit down with your spouse, and you're going to put together a to-don't list. And it's going to be so freeing. You'll be like, oh, these are all the things I don't have to do. You're going to do that. Some of you who are single, you're going to go home, and maybe you've been wanting to mingle, and you need to create a to-don't list so that you can focus on maybe you come and serve, and you see a guy just worshiping ladies, and he doesn't have a ring on his finger, and you think, maybe I should get to know him a little bit better. I'm just trying to give some good advice to all our young people here today. But focus on what's important, create that to-don't list, because here's the truth. The best leaders don't do more. They do more of what matters most. They don't do more. They do more of what matters most. Number three, be ruthlessly selective in your yeses. Ruthlessly selective in your yeses. Every time you say yes to something, there is less of you for something else. Every time you say yes to something, there is less of you for something else, so make sure your yes is worth the less. The barrier to a meaningful life, I truly believe this, because I believe culture, society will tell you that it's that people aren't committed. I don't believe it's a lack of commitment at all. What I believe it is overcommitment. That we're so busy doing so many things that it's hard for us to focus on the most important things. The barrier to a meaningful life for most people today is letting go of some things. Every time you feel like you need more, take an inventory of where you are. Is it worth putting on the pile? Do you need to get rid of something first? Being selective is the path to the productive. It's the path to the productive. But there are always a couple things that we need to do as followers of Jesus. And so you can say no to some things by saying yes to others, but there are things that all of us as followers of Jesus should be saying yes to. There's something in the Bible that's called the Great Commandment. Somebody asked Jesus, what's the most important thing? And he said this, he said, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then love others as yourself. So we're called to love God and love others. That's a non-negotiable. And then the other thing is found at the end of Matthew as Jesus is departing. He gives us something called the Great Commission. He said, go and make disciples of all people. In other words, help people become fully committed followers of Jesus. These are non-negotiables. We don't get to say no to these things. So you build your life, this is how it starts. You build your life around those things. See, the problem for a lot of us is that we try to add God into our life instead of making God the center of our life. Because when you make him the center, every decision filters through God's eyes first, through his hands first. And when it's gone through his hands, it's blessed. But a lot of the decisions, quite honestly, that I make in life, I never really consult God about. And so I'm hoping that it will be blessed, but I'm not knowing that it's going to be. If your life is centered around Christ, we invest our time into the things that glorify God. I invest my time into things that build the church. Invest my time and my energy into those things which will empower others to know and live for Jesus. Listen, we don't go to church. We are the church. We don't look for a church that meets our needs. We look for a church that will meet the needs of other people in the community who are in need of the hope and the healing that Jesus can bring. Yes, I know there are times when we need each other, but it can't be the sole reason that we show up. We want to help people discover their purpose and their passion. And here's what I found, is when you help somebody discover their purpose and their passion, you help somebody lead them to Jesus, that it reinvigorates you. It breathes life into you. It's not just about giving, but it gives back. Make a difference through giving my life away. That's what I want it to be, our hearts. See, sometimes you will take some heat for this type of lifestyle because people won't understand it. I remember when I first gave my life to Jesus, my dad's not a Christian, and he would say, Why are you like so passionate about this? Why do you go to church on Sunday morning for Sunday school and Sunday morning service and Sunday night? Because I was like super spiritual back then, all right? And Wednesday night, he's like, he didn't get it. And anytime the doors were open, I was like, God changed my life. I just want to express my gratitude. I just want to be around people who will do that with me. I don't even know that it was a very good answer. It's just what I felt. That I wanted to do those things, not that I needed to. Because I'll tell you what's normal. Normal is busy. Normal is to say yes to everything. Normal is to live stressed out. Normal is to be overwhelmed. Normal is broken relationships and broken homes. Normal is overwork. Normal is kids not serving God. I don't want to be normal, church. God's got more for us. We must look different, not because we're looking down our nose at people, but because we must invest in the areas and the things that most people don't understand. We're investing in things that are eternal, not just here on this earth. We're going to pass away one day, and what legacy are we leaving to the next generations after us? We're investing in the things that touch the heart of God. So I close with this. The reason that most of us work so hard is often because we want to please people, because we want to impress them. So we try to perform better than others. And our identity becomes wrapped up in what we do instead of who we are. But I want to remind you, I told you I want to encourage you, I want to remind you who you are to God. You are loved. Regardless of what you ever do, God loves you. You are chosen by God. You are His child. You are an ambassador, a representative of Jesus. You are a friend of God. You are forgiven no matter what you've done. You're forgiven. You are an heir, and God has great things for you. His love, His joy, His peace, His life. You are the salt of the earth, a city on a hill, the light of the world, because Jesus lives inside of you. You are an overcomer. Even when you don't feel it, you can claim it through the power of Jesus. You are set apart because God has called you to a purpose, and you can live that out with Him. We are different. And God is calling us to live that way, not to be holier than thou, but to say, God, I am humbled by the honor and the opportunity to serve you. We must start living from God's approval and for God's approval. Live from all that He's made you to be. Stand on the promises that He's given you in this book, the Bible. No longer trying to earn what God has already freely given you. Live out of His love. Live out of His joy. Live out of His peace. And the crazy thing is that everybody around us will see it. We won't have to try so hard by busying ourselves with a bunch of stuff. It will just naturally come out of who we are. Because busyness is not a symptom of survival. We might think that it's trying to keep everything that needs to be done. Busyness is a symptom of approval, needing everyone, or some people, or even ourselves, to be validated by what's done instead of who we've become. Ecclesiastes 4:6, it is better to have only a little with peace of mind than to be busy all the time. I'll read that one more time. It is better to have only a little with peace of mind than to be busy all the time. If you want to give God your best yes, be like Mary. Choose the one thing that is necessary. Trust that God is enough. Give Him the time and attention He deserves. It's there that you'll find everything that you need.